we have Ryan Olsen with us from Whitebone Creations, and he is going to talk us through the process of basically doing a Euro mount, or cleaning your skull for a Euro mount anyway, not necessarily mounting it. So, because I get this question all the time, and I've done it a few times myself, and I just never. Of course, I've watched a million different videos on YouTube, and Ryan's are the best, and that's kind of how I found Ryan. But I've never had the results that I feel like I get when I bring it to somebody who's been doing it for a long time. So anyway, hopefully we can give you some pieces of the puzzle here. And without further ado, Ryan, how's it going, man?
Oh, good, man. Very good. Thank you very much for having me on. This is kind of exciting. This is my first live or video podcast ever. So
Oh,
it's a
nice,
first. Yeah,
nice.
for
And
sure.
you've been on Jay Scott's podcast, right?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I was on Jay's podcast, I think. Jay's a good friend. Um, and it just any excuse I get to talk hunting and fishing, anything related, I'm all in for sure.
Awesome, awesome. Why don't you give us a rundown here
Oh,
from in the field? You got an
oh,
animal on the ground.
yeah, perfect. So, and I know where you're coming from because I've been there and I've dealt with I feel like I've dealt with most of the horrible scenarios out there. So, um, just a couple of different scenarios. Let's just say we're up in your neck of the woods and it's hot, right? Let's say I'm a California resident. I'm up in your neck of the woods and I thump a Coues deer buck and I'm going to be on the mountain for a couple of days with some friends before we all head back. And I want to Euro that skull.
Mhm.
So, my 2 cents, and this just applies across the board on any animal, is I don't like the hide off. I don't want anything to dry to the bone. That's
Okay.
my rule number one. So if you're on the mountain and you harvest that coos buck and you tear everything down, leave the face on that, leave the face on that animal as much as possible. And then if you're traveling from state to state, this is the key, and you have to remove hide, brain, and eyes.
Hmm.
Go to your local car wash. Go to your car wash and peel that cape there, or just peel off his face, remove the eyes, and power wash out the brain. It'll take you 3 seconds. Just stick the nozzle in the brain hole and
Yeah.
back away because it's going to come out. But
Ugh.
that's going to, you've been there, right? You know, so it's gnarly, but that's where your stink is coming from. If you've been out there a couple days, head riding around the back of the truck, and oh man, it's starting to stink. That's where that's where all your spoilage starts. That's when your maggots come in. And if you're at the car wash, you've taken the hide off for travel, you've power washed kind of the skull, and I'm just talking about hydrating it, getting it wet, get the brains and eyes out, and then wrap it in a bag because you're not going to get your stink anymore. The
Okay.
bag, keep it hydrated. Don't just throw it in the back of the truck because then all that tissue that's on the outside of the skull is going to just pull right into the bone. The
Okay.
bone is going to put all the oils in. The oils is what dictate your final your final um you
Finish.
know yeah, your final finish is all about oil in the bones.
Okay.
And there's a delicate chance of removing excuse me, removing oils too far and making a bone chalky, or
Mhm.
pulling it out just right and getting that white glass look. So I guess to summarize that piece, you shoot whatever it is in the field,
Mhm.
including a big bull elk. Leave that hide on until you either give it to the guy that's going to process it yourself, or right before you got to cross a state line. Just leave that hide on. Your product would be much better at the end of the day.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
it.
Animal. Don't matter what it is. Don't matter if it's a. Let me give you one more scenario, just because the conversation it'll come up. Say I'm up on the mountain, I kill a once in a lifetime sheep, and I'm
Mhm.
going to have it full body mounted. I gotta get the cape off it right now. That is fine. Just skin it, cape it, life size, but get that skull and everything out of the sun, because most guys now are taking those animals and they'll euro the skull immediately. so they can have it on the shelf in a week or 2 weeks or whatever.
Right.
And then when they get the hide and everything back from the taxidermist in 8-9 months, then they can just cut it off the skull cap. But they can enjoy that trophy immediately. So if you're on the field and you have to pull the cape off, get it wrapped up. Get it.
I don't remember exactly what you were saying before we.
So we I guess we were just kind of summarizing. Animal goes down in the field. Leave the hide on as long as you can, and the idea is all the fats and oils and meats stay kind of in the hide, right? It's an insulator. As soon as we pull hide off, that meat and tissue wants to soak into the bone, and that gives us a poor quality finished product.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of hydration that comes into, guys will go through the process and they'll do just exactly what I said. Take the eyes, take the brains out, do it at the car wash, get it wet, get it in a bag, bring it home, and then pull it out of the bag and put it in the freezer. Nothing will dehydrate a tissue like a freezer. So I get guys cold weather environments or whatever, and they're like, hey, I can't get to it. I need to freeze it. Leave it in that bag. Leave it in that bag. And then when you go to work on it, when you go to thaw it,
Mm-hmm.
thaw it in water. Leave everything as wet as you can get it. That's my greatest advice for the finished product. Leave everything wet. Don't let it dry out. Don't let it turn into jerky. It just won't look good when it's all said and done.
Right. Okay.
So kind of next process, kind of rule number one, let's say you get it with hide and everything in it. It's a fresh kill, local guy to a local, say to me, like everything here came in this week, right? So everything had a face on it, had tissue on it, had everything.
Right.
So I like to take off as much as possible. So rule number one, skin it, and I'll just show you some of the film, but I cut everything right up the center of the nose and I just peel it right and left of the face.
Okay.
I'm trying to do the exact opposite of a taxidermist. A taxidermist will take and leave as much tissue on the animal as possible in order to minimize, I guess, his fleshing process.
Right.
I'm the opposite. I want to pull off everything I can before I start boiling.
Right.
Pull eyes, remove the jaw from the top of the head. Any big tissue head meat, like bears have huge hunks of meat on the back of their head.
Mm-hmm.
Pigs have those huge cheek meats. Sheep have a great big shock absorber in the back of their head.
Right.
Actually, we're going to boil this animal. So we're going to take and remove as much as we can. And whatever we remove ahead of time just saves you energy and time in the boil.
Got it. Makes sense.
So essentially, rule number one would be get the hide off and get it right into your boil or get it right into water. Some of these animals I just couldn't do in the same day. So I would skin them and I just have a great big trash can and I just fill it full of water and I soak them in that trash can until it's time. And you'll notice almost instantly when you see a head that you skinned is nice and white and fleshy looking. And if you give it 10 minutes, it starts to just turn red, right? It starts to turn red and dry up. If you put it in the water, it will rehydrate everything.
Right.
The same rules come from a deadhead. You're out and you find a deadhead that's just, again, it's prairie jerky, right? Hide, everything's crunchy on there. People want to Euro those and clean them up. You can absolutely do that, but the first thing you're going to want to do is just to get it in a bucket, a barrel of water, and just give it 5 or 6 days to rehydrate. That water is going to do most of your work. It's going to smell like the devil's onion, but that is the best for you because you won't be able to remove hide off a dead head that's rigid and jerky. And if you're trying to cut on that stuff, you're really looking for a big accident with yourself. So just hydrate it, then get everything off, and then continue this process. The only difference between a fresh head and a dead head is just getting it to where that tissue is hydrated.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've got it all off, got all the tissue off, we sprayed out the brains. You're ready for the next step. What are some of the things that let's talk about horned animals or antlered animals, because I know it's different than, obviously like a bear skull or where the whole thing's going in.
Right, right. Yeah, and I like to distinguish the difference between almost three different types. So when it comes to antlered animals, in every case, I like to wrap the pedicle of the horn and all the way up to what would be the depth of your water. So a lot of times I give myself 10 inches of surface area. Well, I take just regular old shipping shrink wrap from like the UPS store or Home Depot or whatever, and I wrap below the base of the horn, around the pedicle, and I wrap, 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 wrap. I'll send you some footage.
Okay.
And then I take electrical tape and I go over that to keep it from delaminating essentially. And then I throw a zip tie at the top.
Okay.
Because we're boiling these animals, when you put it in water or water with a degreaser, it will remove some of that beautiful natural coloring on an antlered animal.
Right.
And if you don't have to recolor, don't recolor. It's just so much better. Anybody that's hunted a couple of days in their life can look at an animal that's been recolored. I have done literally thousands of them. I hate every one I've ever had to do. It just doesn't look as good as it does natural. So on an antlered animal, wrap them so when that boil comes up, it's boiling against a plastic wrap and not your fresh antler.
Mm-hmm.
On a horned animal, those horns are going to have to come off. Matter of fact, let's see if I can show you right here. This is a horned animal right now. So on all horned animals, the actual horn comes off a horned core.
Right.
Could you see? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to boil this with the horns in it. So when you put it in the pot, I don't use any sort of soaps or solutions because I don't want it to damage the horn, which essentially is made of keratin and fats and proteins.
Right.
So I just boil clear water until I can knock this piece free. And I filmed this actual one for you to where I knock this with a hammer. This comes off, then it's the same process. And then bears, cats, coyotes, any of that stuff, just take that whole head and go right in the pot.
Right.
Now, I like to use a splash of OxyClean, laundry detergent, any sort of soaps, because as you're boiling, right, now you're taking, I look at it like if you just had a steak with a bone in it and you threw it in a pot. If you boil for a amount of time, you're going to get all the, again, fats and greases and all that stuff start to separate in the boil. Same thing's happening with your head times 10. You have all this crud in that head that's boiling. So the soaps are going to kind of keep it separated in the boil.
Right.
That's what's going on with the soap.
Reattached, basically.
Yep. And so the part that everybody wants me to tell them is, hey, man, how long do I boil? Every animal's different. Yeah. The younger the animal, the less, the older he is, the greater you're going to boil. So my rule is I boil until the skin on the top of the nose splits, like on this pig right here. On this pig, there is just a little thin membrane of skin right here. As soon as that splits and I can see bone, I pull it out of the pot and I'm a power washer. So I'm taking a little electric power washer, just wash everything I can off. So essentially,
kind of PSA.
I put it with red meat, I pull it out and it's gray and split. And when I'm washing, if I see any red meat, I just kind of avoid it. I wash off everything that's brown, and then I go back in the pot till all that meat is, turned to a gray or a brown, because that's the point where it wants to separate from the bone.
Got it. So real quick, what kind of PSI are you using, and what kind of a nozzle?
So I like the red tip. I think a lot of these washers are not being sold. The red tip is just a zero tip. It's just a hard spray. I always start there. The unit I buy it from Lowe's. It's like, they vary between $79 and $99. It's 17 PSI, made by a company called Greenworks. 110 electric, right? It's the barrier to entry to the skull work is nothing.
Right.
The pots and stuff we boil, I typically will use them from Walmart. I've changed my process a little bit because I'm doing several hundred pieces a year. But if a guy wants to get started just to do his own, go to Walmart and buy that turkey fryer pot, right? It's like $49. You
Right.
got a propane bottle. You got this big burner that's like 50,000 BTUs. And as long as your head will fit down in that pot, great. My suggestion is don't run in the kitchen and start using your wife's stuff because setting yourself up for an argument you don't want. But
Exactly.
so those two pieces, right? So you got your burner because you're boiling. You got your power washer from Lowe's. And again, it's just a real 1700 psi on a little residential retail unit is really not putting out 1700 psi,
Oh, no.
right? It's a fast way of doing it. It'll register that at the motor, but at the nozzle, it's less than that.
Yeah.
And I use the red tip, and then it's just kind of become a joke trademark saying, but you need to spray into every hole in every orifice. Anywhere that there's a hole on that skull, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean anywhere, you need to spray into it.
Yep.
In every case, when you spray into a hole, you're going to get product or tissue coming out of another hole in almost every case. So what you're trying to do is, in the jaw area, there's no way to get to that stuff. So you have to spray down through one side of the jaw and pushing goop out of the other, or you're going to get those oily marks.
Gosh.
So,
Is that a Cali hog?
huh?
Is that a California hog?
That's I got them tough to pull all the way out, but it's not a very big hog.
That's
He
a
just looks he
man.
just looks impressive because the tusks are all the way out.
That's
I,
crazy.
I always joke that if I could pull antlers out, I'd do those too, right? So make every make every deer a little more impressive. Um, Here's just as an example. There's a bear. I don't know how well you can see it, but in
Yeah.
his jaw, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big holes there. I spend most of my time taking that nozzle and spraying it down into those holes and watching stuff come out. And
Gotcha.
it just and I just wash it till it's clean. Um, it just helps your finished product. It'll take any of that oil that we're wanting not to see come through the bone later and
Uh,
just eliminate it.
awesome.
So that part seems really basic, but just boil till it splits. Wash off all your gray meat. If you're washing that white tendony stuff or pink, red meat, you're just fighting it. Put it back in the boil and let the boil do the job, right? As soon as you pull it out, you'll just see everything go away. Depending on what it is, I can do a bobcat in like 6 or 7 minutes. I
Uh-huh.
can do, elk take me 3 or 4 hours. So
Right.
it's everything under the sun. But just boil till it's clean. I personally, I'll give you one more detail, see if I can show you, but I personally don't like the nasal cavity and the
Uh-huh.
earbud. And the only reason I don't like them is because I physically don't think you can get them clean. So
Okay.
you'll see guys that have the nose bones in the skull. It's all fine, but you're always going to see oiling up in the crown and a little bit of oiling here and there. Aesthetically, you're thinking, oh man, it's all there. It's museum quality. But if you were to go take a pair of forceps, and I can show you this too, if you pull that out, you're going
Right.
to find so much stuff going on in there.
Okay.
Any, anything that's lung shot, right? They're suffocating, right? That blood goes right into the nasal cavity, and it's just, you can wash it all clean and take a quick look and be like, oh, it's clean. As soon as you remove those bones, you can see what was left in that.
Okay.
I had one completely clean. I couldn't get it figured out. I was having it was a pig, and I was having like a spot of rust up on his head. This is years ago, 20 some years ago. And I couldn't figure it out. So I went in there, started removing nose bones, and there was
Uh-huh.
a full arrow and shaft in the nose of that pig that I had cleaned. It was done. And I would have never known had I not pulled that stuff out.
Unreal.
And then I remove the ear butts, or what they call the auditory bool. On a pig, there's a little nodule here. I'm gonna show you all that stuff. So I break free the stuff that's loose inside a skull, and I'm not
Okay.
damaging the skull, but in the earbud, I'll stick a screwdriver in there and pop it out, and there's just tissue and everything that grows around it. As soon as you pop it out, everything comes out clean. The brain liner, everything you can imagine just gets eliminated.
Okay.
And the rule for me, I would love to see pure white skulls every single time, but I would rather have clean skulls for you every time.
Yeah.
Oil in the bone is just that inherent nature of that animal. We don't get to choose whether or not they're perfect or not. I mean, I have pigs that that just never come white. They're perfectly clean, and I'm happy with that. And then I get pigs that are just like, why can't they all look like this? It's just their genetic makeup and what's going on with them. So I want to tell people too, don't beat yourself up if it doesn't look like the magazine quality or the edited photo you saw on Instagram, right? They're
Right.
not all this. Just focus on getting them clean and let that animal be your animal. So,
Yeah.
so step 2, get everything off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Power wash everything off. The third step, and the part that's kind of skyrocketed me to being this authority on skulls, which I'm not, but that's the part that's pushed me over the edge, is what I call the Whitebone Creation mix. But everybody is always whitened with peroxide.
Right.
Number one question, where do I get the peroxide? For years and years and years, I would buy it at the beauty supply. I would go buy 1-gallon tubs of what it said 40%, man, I'm sorry, 40% by volume liquid developer. And that developer, 40% by volume, was actually 12% peroxide. I didn't know one from the other. This stuff just made it white. And what I did is I mixed it 50-50 with water, and then I brought that to a boil with my skulls in there, and it made instant white bone, period. That was the end of it. The second that stuff hit a boil, whatever changed molecularly, chemically, whatever, it was instant white.
Okay.
And so I pull them out of the boil, rinse them clean, set them in the sun, and I still am producing skull work in moments compared to what it takes maybe somebody that does it a different method, whether it's wrought off or beetles or whatever. So when you're washing that initial wash, what I call the initial boil, and you're getting everything clean and you're frustrated because there's some tight stuff on the back of the head, or there's just something you can't get free, just leave it. Because when you boil it in the peroxide, which is your next step, what I call your color batch, when you boil it in that peroxide, there is nothing that will stick to a skull. I mean, it is gone right now. It takes any sort of tendon or tissue and just turns it into a gelatin, and just off it goes.
Really?
At that point in the whitening process, I'll change my nozzle from the red tip to a yellow tip or a white tip, which is like going from a zero spray, like a needle, versus like a small fan. And that fan, I'm just wiping off chemicals, what I'm doing, chemical and loose debris. One other quick tip, right? So we've washed in the chemical, we've got it white, we blow off a little bit of the excess that was left on there. I like to go back into the mix one more time to where that, say there was a little piece of tendon that I washed clean.
Mm-hmm.
I want that oxide to now touch that piece of bone.
Got it.
And then pull it out, give it a quick rinse, and set it in the sun to dry. That is how everything you're seeing here got here within a couple of hours. So this is all still drying. I dry with just a regular old $9 cheapy fan. I just blow cold air over it. I don't blow any heat on anything anymore. I think I used to use heat, like quite a bit of like little fan heaters, and I think fan heat will actually pull oil out. So if you use cool air, it just locks everything up inside the skull, if there is anything inside that bone. And then really the last and final step is I give everything that comes through here a coat of flooring mop and glow.
Okay.
Literally just the product that your great grandmother would have used on her linoleum. You know what I mean? It's just it's a floor washing product. I'm gonna show you right now. I get so many people mop and glow, regular old classic mop and glow. You buy it at a grocery store, you buy it anywhere in the US. People struggle buying it other places. I get a lot of comments from guys in Australia that can't find an equal mop and glow product. But what that does is it seals the bone. You know how bone is kind of porousy, and
right.
I don't even know if porousy is a word, but it's kind of porous.
Yeah.
So it sits on the counter and it's on display, and in a year things start to look a little bit dingy and dusty.
Right.
No matter what that skull looks like right here today, under anybody's method, in a year from now, it will just take on its own natural tones. It'll still be nice and white and beautiful, but It's not going to go from that brilliant, shocking, snowblind white. It's going to take on its own natural color. That's just natural oils in the bone coming out. um, with Mop and Glow on the outside, it will mitigate some of that, and then annually, biannually, whatever, you can take and just rinse those skulls, all the dust off them, and it will never get into that porous part. You'll never have to clean it. It's just a beautiful finished product. It gives it a very light sheen, kind of a lanolin smell.
Mm-hmm.
One coat, just one nice clean coat is just going to make it look natural bone. Two
Right.
coats make it look shiny. I do not like shiny, and I put it on everything but antlers. So all my antelope, all my sheep, those sheep will all get a coat of Mop and Glow on them, and it's just going to seal that horn. It's going to look finished and beautiful.
Nice.
I don't know if I got it.
So
I don't know if that's Mop and Glowed or not. I was going to show you something that had been Mop and Glowed, but essentially it's just a beautiful end finish.
I'm gonna grab one of mine real quick because I don't know how they did it. It's really natural looking. Like, now this is several years old and I haven't done anything to it. This has got velvet on it too, which is also
right. That's by far the hardest.
Yeah, I would imagine. But well, we might want to talk about that. But it was never white, but it's always had this very like, I don't know, it's really, really.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they painted it or what, because, well, I don't know.
Probably not painted it. Probably took on its own kind of natural color. And again, just the inherent nature.
Favorite one that I've ever. It almost looks like it's made out of plaster.
Yeah.
But and I never knew how they did it. I'm still friends with the guy. I should give him a call and ask him. But
so that one's got no nose bones in it, and you can see the side sinus cavity where he's kind of power washed through. So if you show me like a profile of that one, see that. So he's blown through the sinus side with the power washer.
Right.
Nothing is harder. That's not a scenario, but nothing is harder than a young deer. And I'm talking a really young deer. Like you get a deer that's 2 or 3 years old, they're super delicate.
This guy wasn't very old.
He's not?
No, I don't know, he's probably a 3-year-old.
Everybody brags about having big bucks, man. I always tell everybody, man, I've killed them way smaller than that. Right?
Okay.
And I have.
So I bring it up because all my other ones that I have, aside from that one, and those are a little bit harder. Like I got some antelope ones back here, but they all have that like yellowish look to them.
It's normal. It's very much normal. That permanent bright white thing is a bit of a myth. I can walk you right now into my room and show you stuff that's been there for 20 years. It looks good, and then there's some of them that have just dinged up, and I've done all of them in there. You want to go on a walkabout? Walkabout? I'll actually show you.
No, that's all right, man.
All right.
No
worries.
So, I guess we brought up an interesting thing. So, when it's velvet, obviously there's a whole velvet preparation thing, which we're not going to get into.
Right.
Even though I need to do a podcast on that because I've lost a couple of deer now in the last few years. Matter of fact, I don't know if you could see that one right there.
Right.
That one I lost the velvet on and ended up having to recolor the horns on it, the antlers on it. I didn't recolor it. My buddy Dave did it for me. That one I wanted to keep the velvet, and I was pissed because I lost it. Anyhow, what do you need to do if you manage to save the velvet and you want to, you don't really want to mount the whole thing, but you want to have a euro on it? What are you doing to protect the?
Yeah, man, I absolutely hate velvet euros. I hate them because I haven't mastered it.
Okay.
But I've done dozens and dozens. Matter of fact, I got one laying right here. I'll show you since we're done. This deer was killed in late November. It's a stag, and this deer come in spoiled. So I'm not sure and it was, dude, it just looked awful anyway. It looked exactly like it did. But so I cure with acetone. I'm
Okay.
probably the only guy out there. If you go to a taxidermist, most everybody would poke the tip of the antler
Uh-huh.
and come in through the base, and they would inject formaldehyde in through the vein. So
Right.
the vein that runs inside the velvet that's feeding the velvet and developing that horn, they would literally pump formaldehyde in there until it runs formaldehyde out the nose or out the tips of the horn. You can't get your hands on formaldehyde. Not
Yeah.
as a hobby, not as a homeowner, you're just not doing it.
Yeah.
So I have cured dozens and dozens and dozens with just regular straight acetone.
Okay.
The degrease with acetone. I've got a handful of bobcat skulls in a jar of acetone right now. Just it literally dissolves oil.
Got it.
So the question is, and you're probably in the toughest climate, right? You guys shoot an archery buck up there in Arizona in that 100+ degree heat, and you got 4 or 5 hours to get it dealt with, right? As to where if we shoot one up on the mountain somewhere here in the 50 degrees, I could go 2 or 3 days without dealing with it.
Yeah.
So timing is everything. I don't know the right answer. So what I'll do a lot of times, if a guy brings me, hey, I just shot a velvet buck, and they bring it to me, I will put a big plastic bag over it, over the entire antler. I'll shrink wrap the base, and I'll Euro it instantly. I'll just Euro it because I can do it in about 30 minutes. And I try and keep as much heat off as possible. Then
Okay.
I take and invert it. I put it upside down, so the skull up, horns down. I do poke little tiny holes, whether it's the tip of a knife or a little ice pick, just so I'm getting things saturated. Anywhere I can see, I can take with my fingers and I can feel actually pressure where there's a vein in there.
Okay.
I kind of give it a poke, and then I literally just sponge on acetone. I just saturate it to where the whole thing is just dripping with acetone.
Okay.
And
So on the outsides of the
right on the outside. Yeah, I don't inject anything. I just haven't. I've had success with this. It's a delicate thing to tell people because you have really got to saturate it and get those veins, flat and squeezed out. Make sure there's nothing in there because if the blood sits in there, that will spoil and it'll just slip instantly.
Yeah.
I got home of a buck that a guy brought me this year, and he goes, "I think it's fine." And we went to pull it out of the bag, and just all the velvet came off the horn. So I was like, "Dude,
Yeah.
how long has it been in there?" He's, "Oh, it's only been 4 days." I'm like, "Dude,
Oh.
came out of Bakersfield, bro. What do you?" So we just sprayed it clean and colored it. And you're right, it's not as good. If you've ever seen an antler that just the velvet just came off of, it's pure white like all this bone. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There is a company out there that will actually revelvet, and they do a really good job.
Yeah. I have
Spe-
one. I
yeah.
had one done with flocking on it or whatever, and mine looks like shit.
Oh,
Like,
really?
it looks. You know what? I shouldn't say it. It looks good if you're sticking far away from, but if you get within normal distance, like 5
Right.
feet, you could tell automatically. My wife's like, that thing looks so fake. It
Well,
is.
the original versions were kind of like that, and some people would say they look too good.
Yeah.
Because everything's nice and uniform, as to where normal velvet is cowlicky and
Yeah.
kind of all over. So I stick it upside down and I saturate it, and I don't like it in the sun because the sun will spoil, but I like to get it in front of a fan, right?
Okay.
So we're drying naturally. I've had guys Euro them, stick them in the freezer, so the skull's done. Stick them in the freezer, did all the vein thing, stick them in the freezer, and let the freezer dehydrate them. Essentially, you're freeze drying velvet. If you have the choice to do that, that works great. Essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to dry that velvet to the horn. You're trying to cure it with the hair follicle erect, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part. And then when it's dry, I use the 2-finger rule where I take both sides of the antler and I give it a wiggle. If I can feel that velvet moving, if you've ever felt a fresh buck, you can literally move that velvet on the bone. If it's dry and you can't wiggle it anymore, you're good. And I literally take it in the sink and I use shampoo and conditioner and I scrub it down. I get all the dust and oil out, and then I blow dry it with like a little dog brush. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's a process. It'll take you from doing, a Euro in 1 day to 10 days. And I always do the Euro so fast because I'm trying not to damage the horns that I never like those early season bucks. They all look, for example, this deer right here, right? So this deer came in spoiled. I don't know if you can see it or not, but
Oh yeah.
that crown is just not pure white. Nothing about this deer is pure white.
Yeah.
This deer is sick, actually. This deer came in, I'm assuming sick. So this antler is actually broke. It was broken velvet. This is all blood clotted. He had no nuts. You know,
Wow.
he was just a stag that I think got scratched up pretty good by line, but everything is rubbed and nasty, and that's just acetone cured. And the guy that harvested it, he's stoked. This is his favorite deer. He loves all this nasty, and
Yeah.
me as the
That's
cleaned
cool.
it up. I don't
It,
even want to look at the guy.
it's character. So,
It is. It is
real,
scary.
so like if I was going to be, let's say, up in the, high country or whatever, and can you do the acetone? Can you inject the acetone also, or is it just on the outside?
You can. I mean, if you're capable and you can do that, yeah, injecting would be the best.
Okay.
Um,
Just thinking
but
if
if
I
you can't,
brought
if
syringes with me or whatever.
what's that?
If I just brought a few syringes with me, like, in the
Oh yeah.
backpack, poke some holes in it, squirt it, and then douse it on the outside.
Yeah. Oh, you'd get away with it. You'd be fine. And I would strongly suggest to kind of just feel your way around while that velvet is fresh and feel for those spots that are spongy that feel like veins, right? Just poke them, poke them, poke them, poke them. Because even if that blood runs out on the velvet, you're
Yeah.
gonna wash it all later. It's fine. Just make it so you don't have a pocket of blood that could essentially spoil.
Got it.
Um, and
Got it.
then and just do your best to, because it's super delicate, right? So do your best when handling, um, trophy shots. Don't take a big old bloody grip of it, right? It's just all that stuff. You just got to be delicate with them, but
You don't
um,
want to you don't want to like milk the blood out of the veins, do you? Like, run your finger or do.
yeah, no, you can, and I do,
Okay.
yeah. So if I find that vein and I can give it a couple of little pokes, I'm just squeezing. I'm just squeezing all that stuff out of there. I want it to run thin as possible against the bone.
Got it.
Because I'm gonna wash all that later. All that's gonna get, what I call the big shampoo rub. So, yeah, I have no issues with that. I like to get it out of there, especially once all your, trophy shots are taken care of and everything looks nice and clean. Then I just start squeezing and poking and letting it dry. Especially if you can put it up under the shade of a tree and the wind's blowing across it,
Uh-huh.
and you're good.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a little tidbit that I never kill any big freaking velvet bucks anyway. It's like my white whale, my Moby Dick.
I
Uh,
never killed big anything bucks, so we're good, bro. We're good.
I don't have any giants, but I have a couple that you would consider, fairly big, or at least. But
Nice.
yeah, I just, when it comes to velvet, I don't know. I can't seem to kill a big one, but now I keep shooting that like 130-ish,
Uh-huh.
muley or whatever, but I like them with the velvet, and
I do too.
my
I do
only
too.
two that I like are my two little dinks that I got this guy that I thought was a cruise deer and ended up shooting him by accident, and then I got a 2-point, which was my first early season Arizona buck I ever shot, so I had it capped. And that velvet is absolutely perfect. It looks like it did what killed it.
Nice.
And that's a friend of mine here locally that did that for me, Jesus, almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
And that was, yeah. And it looks perfect. I've never done a damn thing to it. It just sits on the wall there for,
That's awesome.
as long as I have.
There is a product out there too called it's called Velvet Tan that you can buy. It's a blend that comes from like Van Dyke's taxidermy.
Okay.
Probably buy it from any of them, but I know for a fact Van Dyke's has it, and it's an injectable product.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what's in it. I have used it, but I wound up going back to acetone because I can buy a gallon of it for like
Acetone's easy.
$12. You
Yeah.
know,
Easy.
and then I use all the runoff, everything that runs off. I use everything to degrease bone with.
Nice.
So if you ever have something that you're just fighting, man, it doesn't look like, say that velvet buck in the back.
Yeah.
And you just like, I wish it was a different finish. It's probably oil in the bone. I take that thing right there and just set it in acetone for a month.
Yeah.
Pull it out. It won't have a lick of grease on it anywhere.
Gotcha.
Just a process of putting it in acetone for a month.
Yeah, I got
So,
I got a bear head that needs that for sure.
Yeah, use acid. In Alaska, all the game and fish guys they use either diesel or they use gas
Oh,
on their bears. They just take their bears and they just put it in a 5 gallon bucket of gasoline, leave it for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, pull it out, and then give it a good rinse, and then put it in your whitening batch. Man, those bears are, I mean, they look like that. They're just brilliant.
wow, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Is there any
Yeah.
other words of wisdom we want to share with anybody on that process? Because you took us from start to finish to the mop and glow. I think that was your last step, right?
Yeah, that's what I do last is mop and glow. I can get into any of the minutia for each little animal. Like on
Mhm.
pigs, I fill the tusks. If you had to recolor, I use wood stain from Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, whatever. Just match up the label and I apply it with a Q-tip.
Uh-huh.
Let's just you lost some color on the base of your antler. Make
Yeah.
sure you turn that head upside down when you're putting color on it, because last thing you want is wood stain on your white skull. And then
Right.
just take a Q-tip and just dab those spots and blend it. If you had to recolor, you can always get away with it. Um, I just had a lady say, "Hey, I was boiling in my pot and I got some rust spots here and there," but she was using a galvanized pot with peroxide.
Yeah, yeah.
Just one too many times. And so she's like, "What do I do?" And I said, "Just take your knife, your Havalon or whatever you're using, and just scrape that bone or where the rust spot is until you hit white bone." And essentially, she just wiped all those spots right off. Don't be afraid to try. I would just tell somebody, don't be afraid to try any of this. If it's a 200-inch mule deer that you got from somebody somewhere, that's probably not your best sample buck.
No.
But uh, but everybody's got something in the freezer laying behind the barn, a dead head.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, the local butcher, I have guys practicing with just regular like hip bones and stuff like that. I mean, they're just practicing. Don't be afraid to do it. It's affordable. I mentioned in one of the last videos that I had over 1,000 people. No, sorry, I had over 100 people reach out to me and say they started a skull business based on these films,
Oh, wow.
which I was like, holy cow. But I mean, good for them. It's a hobby business. They started doing it themselves. They developed some confidence, and now they're washing skulls for friends and family, making a few bucks. I encourage people to do it. I can tell you that a really good fur taxidermist doesn't love euros,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So
Yep.
if you want to go talk to those guys. They'll love you to do their euros for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Most,
and
most
I don't mean to
want to charge
taxidermy.
a crap ton of money because they don't want to do them.
Oh yeah. And I don't mean to speak for all taxidermists, but the
Yeah.
guys that have stuff on the table here that came from local guys that just, hey man, can you knock these out? I can't do
Right.
them. And it's the fastest way back to your money if somebody's interested, right? So you could bring me that pig right now, just with a head on, go have a long lunch, and I can hand it right back to you like that. There's very few other taxidermy processes that will do that.
No, that's crazy. I was going to
Yeah.
tell you. So start to finish on a pig like that, it takes you what, 3 hours?
No, yeah, hour and a half. The longest part on that's dry time.
Really?
So yeah, I could have that done. I mean, I could conservatively have that done in an hour, if you're okay with it drying on your shelf at home.
Got it.
Yeah, no problem.
That's
No
nice.
problem. Yeah, and it's cool. It's a nice way to. I love the finished product. I love the process. I'm always learning. All this goofy stuff you see behind me is all scraps that came off all these critters. I have an inventory of teeth. I love all the anomalies like horn cores that are damaged. I'm fascinated by it. I've got these rows of teeth. I posted on Instagram the other day because I thought, who in the right mind's ever seen that? So there's a normal row of teeth, right?
Yeah.
No big deal. Look at this critter.
Huh.
What the heck is going on there?
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. Does it
That's-
matter to anybody? Nope. I just love the process. I mean, that thing's 3 times the size.
That's nuts.
I'm always wondering, what happens? Is it genetics? Is it just crazy? So I'm learning. I learn more about animals on this process sometimes than I do on the mountain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it. I guess my 2 cents. I would encourage anybody to give it a try. I am available. I'm slow to react via email or Instagram or that stuff. But if you send me a message, I will do my best to answer your questions. I get so many people taking a photo of something saying, "Hey, can you tell me what I did wrong?"
Yeah.
Most of the time, I'm telling people you didn't do anything wrong. That's how your animal was made. All right, that's how God put him together. You're good. Just love it and live with it. Or it's like, oh man, you use too much peroxide, you use too much OxyClean, you know.
Right.
I always tell people that 50-50 mix on peroxide or that just a scoop of OxyClean. Don't More is not always better.
Yeah.
And then just watch your bone. Watch your bone. If it starts to look etchy or pumicey or starts to feel like concrete, you've gone too far with the boiling process. Stop.
Right.
Stop and wash it clean. Um,
Cool. Well, man,
no,
that's a lot of good information. And let's where can our listeners find out what where I know your biggest presence is definitely YouTube. So let's give them all the
yeah,
places they can find you.
yeah. If you want to see the process, kind of species by species, Whitebone Creations hunting on YouTube. That's kind of that's my channel, and that's where I share some of the hunts and a lot of the skull work. You'll see most of the views on the skull work side. You can search most of the critters here in North America, and we've covered them. And if I haven't, I'm trying to get there. And I'm talking everything from horses to mice, right? Everything in between. It's the same process, but people love it and they search that way. It's Whitebone Creations on Instagram, whitebonecreations@gmail.com if you want to send me an email. Everything's Whitebone Creations. And I'd love to help. I'd love to encourage people to get out there and give it a go for sure.
Awesome, man. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.